Amanda, how are you there? Good to see you. Sorry, I kind of stood up. Oh, you're fine. No, stay seated.
Yeah, great.
Joe? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Here. Coming in smiling, so I guess it wasn't too bad.
No, sorry. Hello, neighbor. How are you? It's good to see you. Oh, here, I was in Ohio, yeah. Oh, my brother. So I try to go every weekend. Yeah. So I told yeah, I'm not really heavily involved since I've only been here 3 years. I went to one of them that were selected. I was
Go back to
not too long after I graduated.
yeah. And the other thing
Seeing your stack of codes of ethics made me realize that I might be on track.
Mine?
Yeah.
I'm from St. Louis. That's 50 and up.
I'll take whatever.
Let's do 50. That's at the end of the meeting. I didn't try by over spring.
And I didn't even think
Because
to ask for anything.
Lynn wanted some, so I just got it in for when I stopped at the office.
That's fine.
There.
Well, but I think that kind of thing.
Way up in the corner. Just haven't gotten around to actually doing it.
So how are the
Okay. I did. The sausage is yummy. I do prefer bacon.
There was bacon yesterday and I didn't get any.
Tara, so it doesn't matter. I thought you were
Looking really
I thought, well, they'll have bacon.
No, yesterday and I didn't get any.
Well, now I feel better. If you didn't get it, and I didn't get it.
I didn't get any. Joe had some. I should just take it off his plate. I can't get up right now. Just give me some of that.
And they're a long way.
Yes.
Even like how some of the board does now.
Well, that was what I was thinking the whole time. But hey, did you see my Apple Pencil yesterday?
No. Did it look like
I
that?
thought maybe you picked it up.
No.
No, like the white pencil that I have to use for my thing. Yeah, it's gone.
No, I didn't.
Appreciate it. Hopefully that'll make this morning go through a little bit more quickly and smoothly. So Patty, thank you for sending out that note last night. Those were, I think, to me, summed up a lot of the bigger issues that we still wanted to discuss this morning. Primarily, I would even boil it down a little more simply, especially dealing with specifically to bylaws and things that are different from policy questions. And it sounds like the first thing maybe we want to tackle is term limits. One, term limits for people who would be appointed, but I think also Matt brought up yesterday the broader term of, do we want term limits at all for any? Matt, is that correct? That was your issue or question? Yes. Okay. So, Matt, do you want me to talk about your thought again on why just not to have term limits, period, for your thought on it?
Yeah, I mean, one thing generally is part of the larger discussion about the value of term limits, but I think we want to avoid deal breakers. We push this thing through, and term limits is such an emotional thing. We don't have them now. So it's almost like we're creating a problem that we don't need to. And where we all said yes to this, perfect, we do. So if you buy that philosophy.
Joe, sorry, Joe, do we need to do roll call again? Or?
No, I think we can just treat this as a
Okay,
meeting.
okay.
That group recessed yesterday and reconvened this morning.
Okay, sorry, Matt.
Yeah, no. So
We're not.
the philosophy being,
Are we
we
streaming?
want to determine maybe introduce that down the road, but not now as we're shoving so much change in people's faces and want them to buy in for various reasons. Maybe largely sidestep that one.
Do you think that's something that potentially could be an issue for some members or delegates that are looking at this, that the addition of term members could be problematic?
Well, I don't know if problematic is the right word, but I mean, you're going to have people on the quote unquote ladder of the officers for 1 year, you're going to have others for 6 years, and still others. Like it introduces math into the equation. We don't like math. That's why we're in this business.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that or Joe?
I think term limits may be an encouragement for something that they feel like they want to see change, they want to see more term limits. I'd rather see it remain, and then be taken out if it gets, delegates decide that they just don't want it, but I'd rather have it there for them.
I don't feel like passionately one way or the other when it comes to term limits. I would lean towards no term limits because well, first of all, having someone on the board for a while allows institutional knowledge and perspective. Case in point. But I also think that, I mean, if someone is doing a good job, they should be able to serve on the board, and if they don't want it, or if somebody else comes in better, then that's it. I mean, this isn't Congress. There's not a ton of PAC money supporting the people on the board of SPJ. So it's a little different. But like I said, it's not something I feel, super strongly about one way or the other, but my preference would be towards no term limits. If it becomes a problem down the road, we can revisit it. But I mean, I defer to the will of the majority on this, but my preference would be no term limits.
Go Kresge, then Matt.
Question more than a comment. If this gets to delegates and if this is the first time ever assessed in detail, and it happens to be this detail, what is the process for saying, like, you know what, if we got to assess this, we will get rid of term limits? Like, what's going to be, because it doesn't sound like this board has a clear conviction on it. So if it stays, and if it becomes a problem, one, are we cool with sacrificing that for the greater good? And two, how does it even work?
Well, that's how the delegate process always.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a change because it would be a change in the bylaws, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it would be kind of what I've seen happen before is we would be rewriting the bylaws or removing it in real time. Yes.
I think what you probably have to do is take a vote on the conceptual document. Here's what we're going to do. And then give the bylaws committee or the board editorial privileges to clean up the language based on whatever amendments, rather than trying to wordsmith a bylaws amendment.
that would be, if this board doesn't really feel strongly about it, don't put it in so this thing can get through. And then the new board can then just keep term limits at the very first meeting, try to rewrite the bylaws, that would be easier to understand.
Amanda?
I would like to ask everybody who's on the pro chapter board, do you have term limits on your pro chapter? I mean, we do. In Tennessee, we have, you can serve, it's like 2 years, 3 years, and you have to take a year off. You can come back on, but having that year off allows for new blood, new opportunities. So I think term limits can provide an opportunity for people who may see somebody who's been on the board for 10 years as not that person they can challenge because that person's just going to be there.
That's for your entire chapter or just,
It's for our entire chapter.
Anyone else? Does anyone else, any other chapter? Go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna add some contextual understanding. The reason I recommended that to the task force is when you read best practices for associations, 95% of the research you will do, you can Google it now, will recommend term limits, including the IRS. So they feel like it's a good way to make sure you continually have fresh ideas and people moving through your board and you don't get stale and stagnant. And the longer people are in power, the more likely there is for downside and corruption. So that's a recommended best practice for nonprofit management. That's why the task force put it in.
Who else? Patty?
I think we should keep it in for all those reasons. I would be open to having this slapped down by delegates in person, but I think we should go forward with it. In terms of the kind of document we put forward to delegates, in addition to the bylaw, what do we call that second? Is it a resolution? I mean, yes, obviously we're gonna have like supporting text, but I'm not sure how we craft that. And maybe that's something we can deal with later, but.
Because that wouldn't have to be the policy changes that we're talking about. Like when we talk about the stipend or we talk about some of that other stuff, it doesn't necessarily need to be, unless I'm incorrect, approved by the full delegation. So maybe it would be us as a board getting on a phone call in June, maybe. You know, we kind of flush some of this stuff out via email digitally and approving that and saying this is a supplemental thing that will back that up if the board has approved it. Would that be how that works?
What you're basically saying is these are some sample policies. These are the policies we would expect to be enacted should this happen. Understanding and an idea of what's to come. It's really just kind of background to help them understand. So I would say like sample policies this board would conduct or would craft. And then the bylaws thing, I think it's a straight bylaws amendment. It's not a resolution. It's the delegate's going to be asked to vote on these new bylaws. And that's the language they will be asked to vote on. All the policies.
Term limits is not a bylaw?
It would be.
It is, okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna go Paul and then Alex.
Yeah, actually, this is one clarification that to amplify your question, Michael. Since bylaws changes have a certain sequence that they have to go through, can we make bylaws amendments from the floor? Robert?
Yeah, I was just looking that up as you were talking. Yeah, and matter of fact, whenever I was president, when we did the bylaws amendment that took the power to raise dues from the convention to the board, we proposed a 10% lid on that. There was a amendment to amend, or a move to amend it to 5% from the floor. An amendment at the delegate meeting requires 2/3 vote to make the amendment. So it's a pretty high bar. It fell one vote short of amending it, so it went through as a 10%. However, the convention can also, I'm giving you more detail, but just because it gets complicated. The convention, the delegates can also initiate a bylaws amendment to come before the next year's convention with a majority vote. And that's what happened there. After that, it failed. They said, we want to revisit this next year, and they did. And that's why it's 5%. So yeah, two-thirds to amend, but they can also propose an amendment for the following year.
So in other words, if we include this and somebody gets bent out of shape over it, it would require 2/3 to take it out?
Yes.
Okay.
The bylaws say the convention amendment does not change, or let's start from the beginning of the sentence, I guess. Proposed bylaws amendments may be amended by convention provided that 2/3 and the convention amendment does not change or add to the general subject matter of the proposed amendment, and the provisions of that, deciding whether it changed, shall be enforced by the presiding officer, who could be overruled by 2/3 vote of all the delegates. And I guess that raises the question of whether, Lynn, you would be the presiding
That's what I was
officer,
just going to ask.
or whether you would be handing it off to Patty or Becker to run that part of the meeting. So that's a detail you'll have to think about.
I think Lynn is a good person for that.
Well, okay, so knowing that, though, I think that's important, and thank you for reading that, Bill, because to me, I would think that a term limit, adding or deleting it, could potentially be a change that would change a big part of it, or is that would be up to you're saying the presiding?
Same subject,
Same subject, yeah.
governance,
Yeah.
writ large.
So then I guess really the question is, to me, to make it sort of easier, if this board doesn't feel strongly either way, which I'm not sure yet, but it's like, would it be easier to keep it in and have it removed, or just not put it in at all and have it added on later?
Yeah, I don't know, we've heard it from enough people that know we feel really strongly. I do want to say that I do support term limits for both ADs and appointed directors. The conversation we had yesterday, which was terrific, thank you for staying late, eased a lot of my concerns about perhaps the appointed board members becoming entrenched. Maybe they were too friendly with the leadership, because you all want a lot of different things from these ADs, so I think, I mean, for the appointed members, so I think we'll be bringing in new blood, but it's to get new blood circulating through new ideas. And I just want to say that 2 or 3 sort of entrenched members stay on a board of 23. But if you have a board of 9 and you have 2 or 3 of them that have been there 10 or more years, that may sort of decrease the amount of new ideas we're getting circulating through there. So I do think it's more imperative on a board of 9. And also, as I said yesterday, I do think they should be treated equally. If the board does want to include term limits, I do think we need to look at not just the appointed members, but also in the bylaws language. It sounds like you can serve for 6 years, go away for a year, and then come back and start all over again as an AD. And Patty, what you said yesterday sounded like it was 6 years and you're done. So I just think we should get it. Assuming we do go forward with it, that we should clarify what we want and perhaps update the bylaws if we don't quite align with that.
I'm opposed to term limits because I think that tells people they don't know how to vote for who they want. But I also think this is a very contentious issue, but a very simple one. Keep people on because they're good, or kick them off because they're entrenched. I don't think this needs to be opened up for extensive debate. In fact, right now, I think we could just vote yay or nay to keep it in. I would tend to want to leave it out because it also helps minimize the change that we'll be bringing forward. We don't have term limits now. We would not have term limits later. If there's a big hue and cry to add it, then we just have it.
Is there anyone else that wants to weigh in? Otherwise, I will go ahead and have us vote on whether we want term limits in or out. Oh, thank you. So those in favor of term limits, say aye. Aye. Well, let's do hand vote. Yes, I agree. In favor of term limits?
Patty, Amanda. Rachel, your hand up.
Sorry, Rachel, again, if you're in favor of term limits.
Seven in favor.
Okay, opposed to term limits?
Everyone else.
No term limits then, so basically what we're gonna do with that is we will tell the bylaws committee to rewrite that to not include term limits. And then that does take away then the appointed versus voted on members, so we'll move on from that. The next bigger, I think, item of discussion possibly is who chooses the appointed members. There was discussion whether it's the nominations committee, whether it's the board. Was there someone, I think, was it Sue or Keith? team that felt strongly about the nominations?
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Keith,
propose
okay.
that, yeah.
Does anyone feel strongly about it being the board that would like to speak to that? Or maybe it's not an issue. Sue, go ahead.
Well, the only thing my proposal is that the nominations, that the nominations themselves could come from the board. That you have the opportunity to have the individuals who are nominated, like the others who are on the board, to do the nominations for a variety of reasons. I think that's probably a good thing. I have no problem with the board, or they can make suggestions.
So right now, the way it's written specifically related to the bylaws, it says that the board selects. So if we're talking about something which Sue just described, where it is sort of a policy that we say, you know, the nominations committee can assist the board in selecting possible individuals, that would be something we could write in a policy and discuss, but does not affect the bylaws. Correct? In Arwen? Okay. So, if anyone.
Or the bylaws could say in consultation with the nominations committee.
Right, or we could keep it out of it, so it's just a policy.
I just wanted to point out that actually Becky answered those questions since she's not here. She answered this when she said a tough one is a compromise. Why not collect nominations for both to perhaps cast a wider net? The board will have the final say.
So that's Becky's one. So is anyone, the way the bylaws would be written now, with it saying that the board selects, or is it's going to be the body that ultimately chooses, is there anyone that is opposed to that and would like to speak to why they would be opposed to that? That's what I know, that's what I'm trying to see.
Is it like the board selects versus the board suggests to the nomination committee?
Right now it says the board selects.
Okay, so so the board selects, that you don't have to go through the nomination committee. Those seven people say we want this one and this one.
It does not specify in the bylaws right now.
Right.
But
And I do think that becomes a
Right.
policy. I do think that would become the policy choice if I was making the decision, that the starting place to identify appointees, when you determine where your gaps are, it's like, well, let's go talk with our folks on the nominations committee. Who did they vet already that didn't get elected? Do you want to consider those people? I mean, I think that it can be a holistic process and the nominations, but that's policy, not bylaw. Yeah.
So, go ahead, Michael.
If, one, if we don't feel strongly about this, and two, we don't think the delegates are gonna feel strongly about it, why are we talking about it?
Well, that's what I was, because it was on the list from yesterday, so it was something that did come up.
Right.
So that's why we are
It's
talking
something
about
that
it.
we feel like, to me, when we bring up issues that even we're kind of mad about, if we think it's going to be a delegate issue or someone thinks it will be, then I think it's worth us addressing, because we're gonna have to do it later anyway. If we're evenly split on something and it's a policy change, I trust people that are with policy.
We're going through Patty's list. She had this on her list, and she just said it's policy, so I think that's it.
So is, oh, Bill, go ahead.
How do you envision this working? The board is elected during the convention, so that's in September.
Mhm.
How soon would numbers 8 and 9?
We actually did talk about that in the task force, as soon as humanly possible. So, you know, you're seated now on the next meeting, which is still at the convention, the first meeting of the new board. And among the things you would determine is what voices don't we have around the table? I don't know that you can make a decision that quickly, but that's the beginning of the process. Did we talk about this? Like, we want that person to be in place, those appointees to be in place by the first something, right?
I kind of, I'm sorry.
Erwin's nodding as well.
We talked about, as a practical matter, it would be nice to have the full board, in place. It's meet December, January, for the next meeting. But it's one of those things, this is one of those little pieces that probably will have to feel our way. I could also envision, if you think about the 7 people who are on the board, in any given year, only some of them are going to be up for election. I can conceive of this group getting together even before convention and saying, if we're elected and everything's cool, these are the 2 people we want. It can happen immediately after election, or it might take 30 or 60 days.
Would 8 and 9 immediately go off the board at the election?
You know, I was thinking about that the other day, and I don't think we've specified that in the bylaws. I think what we want to do is we probably want to write a provision there, perhaps,
Because
to indicate that they would serve until their successors are appointed. So
I
that
would-
there's always a full.
I would
board.
recommend that, and that requires a change in the draft.
It does.
Okay,
And I'll make a note of that. and make
thank
sure
you.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
no, I think that's a good addition. Yes.
The only, something that may come up for delegates is, if you select those from the folks who didn't get elected, does that look cozy? Like, oh, so make it, he had been vetted and approved by the nominations committee, and so now the people who did make it vote him in anyway.
Well, I guess my reaction or how I would, respond to that is, to me, the goal of it is now because we are putting, and I don't want to say restrictions, but sometimes where you live can potentially be a restriction by the pool. When you look at the at-large seats, look at how many people run for them because it's not necessarily based geographically. So to me, when you're removing that from all of the seats, then do we have more people and a greater number of people, a greater pool, right? To me, that's the idea. So potentially you could have 20 great people who are running that would be fantastic board members, but only 3 get chosen that year. So maybe that would make sense for that next person because they are the most qualified, but because we only have 3 spots. I mean, that's how I would explain it. I don't know if others disagree, but that is how I do see it.
So I would eliminate them. I just don't think that, I think you have great potential candidates. I would not dismiss them out of hand. I think they should be like anybody else, open to being single.
So it does sound like that this actually is not an issue. So are we okay leaving it how it is with the bylaws? We are going to have the bylaws committee add that language about the appointees serving until the successor is on. So those were I think the main bylaws issues, unless I'm missing something. Did anyone have, go ahead.
I have some concern about how the nominations committee creates a preferred group of electorate. So does that, and I just don't see how that works. So we have the 6, 8, 10 nomination committee recommendations, but then we have 7 or 8 more people who got voted down by the nominations. I don't understand how that works.
Patty, do you want to?
Right, so we haven't put any numbers on it. It's really how successful is the nominations committee in pulling names together of people who say that they're interested. And so some years, maybe it's just the 3 or 4 that are needed, right? And then other years, maybe there are 20 names and 3 or 4 then are elected from that. And then you'd go back to the 17 that didn't get elected and ask if they would like to try next year. So, I think, are you mostly stumbling on like the idea of endorsing them or having a approved slate?
I just don't understand the process. And
Yeah.
Say the nominations committee has done their work and they've presented these 7 or 8 candidates,
Right.
and a late arrival comes. And maybe there's not opportunity for the nominations committee to deal with this late arrival. Is there a pool that can run that has not gone through the nominations committee process?
Yeah, and that's actually in our proposal that, what are we calling it, self-selected?
Yeah,
Persons can add themselves to the
anyone can.
pool, even if they didn't go through, weren't identified by the nominations committee. Maybe it's a matter of timing, maybe it's a matter of they were actually vetted by the nominations committee and the committee didn't think that they were ready, right? Like, gosh, you've only been an SPJ member for 1 year, and we're not seeing, that that's enough yet to go forward as a candidate. We're happy you're interested, give them some coaching. We're happy you're interested. Please stay in touch as you continue to expand your SPJ knowledge and experience.
So I don't think it's specifically written in the bylaws, right? That part, that would be a policy, or is it in Irwin? I don't know if you can help me with that. The question is about the nominations committee would be sort of like having a recommended slate, if you will, the bylaws, right?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we put the language. I think the only thing we put in the bylaws is that there will be a nominating committee.
Okay.
And then there's the election process.
Okay.
So the idea that, because you're talking about whether or not they would actually endorse a slate or simply endorse candidates. And I think that's a policy choice.
Okay. So knowing that, because I just wrote that down, so what I was kind of hoping is if we have the bylaws issues taken care of and then we vote or vote on that, then I'm gonna make a list and we can kind of pick some of those policy things to start going through. We may not finish them all, but we can start kind of sifting through, which that I added to the list, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Did you have, go ahead, Amanda.
I just wanted to clarify on language here. When we say the nominations committee is going to endorse, because I had the same question yesterday afternoon after our meeting. I think instead of using the word endorse, we should say something like vetted. So I don't see the nominations committee actually like endorsing, candidate A, B, C, and D, but candidate A, B, C, and D have been vetted in terms of they've gone through those, different questions, or they filled out their nominations form, or something like that. They've gone through this process, and the process is in place so that we do get well qualified candidates.
So again, that's a policy thing, so I want to come back to that if that's okay.
Sure.
So if those were your questions related to that or comments?
Yeah.
If they were, then we'll leave.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Follow under.
Is there anything else related to specifically what would be the bylaws changes or any issues?
Yeah, there's one that I think we should decide if we want it to be a bylaws change or policy. And that's number 1 on Patty's list. Should appointed directors be members? This could be policy, but it could also be in the bylaws.
And bylaws, right, Erwin?
At present, we don't require
I'll have to
appointed.
look it up, but I think that actually might be a bylaw.
Bylaws.
No, I looked at them last night, and if it is, I mean, I
Does our
still think it's
document
worth
say
discussing.
anywhere
It should be in the
that the
bylaws.
appointees can
Policy
be
can go
members or
either
not
way.
members?
I mean, to
It
use the
doesn't say that they have to be members.
Already
It doesn't
does
say you have
require
to be
all
members.
board
People are
members,
extrapolating.
to be members of both SPJ and the chapter.
They can be.
When I was in charge of nominations
Because
there.
we keep- this
I've
keeps
been
coming
around
up. It's like,
for a
there's
while.
nowhere that
Outside
says
of the bylaws,
non-members
they
will be
could look at it
recruited.
on your board.
But it could
Requiring
be.
the new member.
Yes. Yeah. We want to avoid that complete flexibility.
Yeah.
It was never an issue. So I guess there's a question here on, do we as a board want to recommend this as a requirement in the bylaws, which might make it also easier to sell to outsiders if we try and bring in, or should this be a policy?
Does anyone feel strongly that they would be opposed to them requiring that appointed members join SPJ?
The problem might be if you decide you need a computer geek. A computer geek might not be a journalist, therefore would not be eligible for membership.
Can you join as an associate? I mean,
An
maybe.
associate is not a member.
Well, maybe we say.
Because it specifically says an associate cannot vote. If you can't vote, that'd be.
But we're allowing appointees who are not, wait a minute, I'm trying to wrap my head around that, that's news. So we're allowing appointees who may or may not be journalists, but they do not have to join SPJ as either a member or a supporter. But if someone is a supporter, they can't join the board. So what if they were a supporter, then they'd have to drop their supporter membership in order to serve as an appointed board member?
No.
I mean,
I don't think
I'm
that
not
that's
suggesting that they
right.
shouldn't serve as an appointed board member, I don't want to put a situation down the road where we've got some snafu bylaws and they're telling someone they actually have to drop their position.
Patty, did you want to?
Yeah, I don't support the idea of having this be a bylaw designation that the appointees should be members or not members. I would like to leave it open. The whole point of the appointee idea is to give the board flexibility to fill gaps that are needed in the immediate short term. So we keep coming back to the computer consultant, technology, let's call it an HR consultant, whatever. That person may not be a journalist ever, may have no interest in, but for whatever reason is willing to work with us for the one-year appointment. So we just don't want to get our hands tied with a bylaw on that, I would say.
Based on what Bill just said, I'm thinking it shouldn't be in the bylaws.
Okay.
Because we want to avoid that situation where we need.
Associates shall not vote, hold national or chapter office, be delegates to national
Well,
convention.
we don't want a situation where an associate member has to resign to be appointed.
Yeah, the language that the bylaws committee drafted indicates the appointed members may be members or non-members. And I think if you look at the rest of the bylaws, I think we need to have the bylaws address the question one way or the other. because it's a qualification for holding an important position. And generally speaking, we have those in the bylaws. So you can leave it as we've drafted it, which does leave you the flexibility to make them members or non-members. Or if you want to make it members, we can make that change.
I support
this
this draft.
Since you were on both the task force and the bylaws, can this board just vote to say we want that in and then let you fix
Oh, yeah.
that issue?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I think that one's settled. Is there anything else? Are we ready for a vote? Makes me very happy to say. Andy?
I just wanted to point out that Eddie has also sent her responses to the
Thank
6
you.
questions.
Do you have them pulled up? Would you want to?
I do. I can read them. I'll just read them in numerical order. Number 1, yeah, she says yes. Number 2, committee, if board is reduced, it can become too close for similar thinking. 3, if board members do. 4, then why get rid of RDs? We already live in those regions and know the areas and chapters. I am totally opposed to that recommendation, as are the chapters in Region 8. 5, no with an exclamation point. Don't tell members how to vote. 6, what are requirements? Will they still be required to attend national and make other costly trips? Some regions have little or no funds.
So it sounds like a lot of those were some comments on the policy stuff. So thank you, Andy. Do I have a motion to approve? Second. The motion would be to approve the bylaws, or Paul, go ahead.
The motion would be to approve the bylaws as the bylaws package proposal as recommended by Patty's task force.
So everything that's in this bylaws packet as, and this is, that's what the board supports going through to the task force.
With changes.
I was gonna say, you may wanna, yes, I was gonna say, we obviously are gonna need to make some adjustments here based on what you talked about, and we need a section on transition. So if you want, you can give us go ahead to finish doing all of that writing. It should be explicit that we have the ability.
Let me amend the motion then, because I'm not a second yet. Taking out the term limits piece, which was in there before, and adding a transition paragraph that would be, I think, non-controversial. So that we have, as if adopted by the delegates this fall, we'd have a game plan for how to do it.
And one other thing that needs to be added to that, we talked about the terms of appointed members existing until their successors are duly.
And including that the terms of appointed members would last until their successors take office.
Is there a second?
But Erwin, I just want to make sure, does that leave enough leeway for you to fix the clarification on the membership requirement for the appointments? Is that in there?
Currently, the language in there says they can be members or non-members. So if that's what you want, that's already there.
That's what we said to leave it as. Okay, so second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Who was the opposed? Rachel.
Thank you. Forward. Now,
And I have problems with the appointee not being board member. I think that's a problem.
The appointee not being a SPJ member? Okay.
now let's tackle some of the policy issues. Top 3 that I wrote down, we definitely, I guess, do we want to make a list first or do we want to start tackling some of them? The top 3 I had, and Patty, feel free to help me with this a little bit. The stipend definitely seems to be something that was the policy endorsed versus vetted when we're talking about the nominations committee. And then also appointed positions. Don't know why I just wrote that down actually. Forget, it happened just now. I think Rachel might have been related to something. I don't know, maybe not. Endorsed versus vetted, the stipend. Are there other major ones? Oh.
One other one that actually I think we can raise and resolve, thanks to Bill McCluskey, is the question of how to do the student or academic interest, because I know there was a great deal of concern about that yesterday. Bill, do you recall what you wrote? Do you want to read it, or do you want me to recall what you told me?
I actually wrote it, I thought, but the basic deal would be, I would have to wordsmith this. If those student is among the 7 elected, then one of the appointed must be a student strongly. If there's no campus representative, an administrator, a teacher appointed must be a campus representative.
Because that will come up. You know, we've had some passionate and articulate viewpoints on that yesterday. And I think that could be a deal killer. And we want to remove all deal killers as we go forward and take this to the delegates. And I thought that was a stroke of genius, Bill. So kudos to you for thinking it. And I think it's a pretty good one that would satisfy. And Sue, would that, you would probably vote.
As long as there's a voice on there, that's the key, student or faculty, as long as those campus interests are represented, that's essential. It's essential.
And that would be a policy.
So that would be a change then, Patty, to policies that you outlined.
Sure.
Would that be a policy or would that be a bylaw?
It could be either.
It could be either. The flexibility of a policy is better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that satisfy Sue?
Oh, yeah.
It's just a policy?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I would say my chapter is for some of the folks that brought this up. I think it's super important, and I think I can sell that to them. I think it'd be great. It is a sort of great policy.
And then Patty, I just want to make sure if we kind of go through this list, is that helpful if we go through like
Yeah, absolutely.
versus vetted, the stipend, and then Alex.
I still have about 46 minutes, so keep going. I could take good notes when you leave TikTok. It's one way to get the ball moving.
But as Patty's task force proposal is to remove specific constituencies, just wonder if we might get into public and one more. For example, if the students bring this up, well, why don't we have one reserved for academics? Why don't we have one reserved for an RE? Why don't we have one reserved for community? In other words, if we do this for students, and I agree students are huge, and I'm going to get on to another idea maybe we could present. I just worry about the yes, but me too, coming up in the context of a 2-hour meeting. And another possibility, it occurred to me last night, I was thinking of the same issue. RDs already have the RD caucus, and I'm quite certain actually the new board will work closely with the RD caucus. We don't have anything like that now for students or academics, and an alternative might be to foster a student caucus that would meet at the convention. It's too diverse. Or an academic caucus of professors.
There are practical considerations. And I think that would become unwieldy, and in fact, a lot of the students aren't able to travel for expense reasons. And so if you look at a roll call vote, most of the student chapters, correct me if I'm wrong, actually aren't even there because they simply cannot afford to attend. So on a practical level, that really doesn't work. And then we tried through the years a number of communications methods to try and pull the various chapters together. What I just think it's unwieldy. I think the thought is a good thought. I think on a practical level, it would never work.
The only thing I would also add to that is if someone wanted to try something like that, they absolutely could do that. That would not be anything that would need to be written down.
Oh, no, I wasn't
So I
suggesting
think
it's
we're
a policy, but I mean, the RD caucus is not really, that's not a thing in the bylaws, but we communicate with them all the time.
Was there someone else who had, I thought I saw a hand over here. No? And I'm going to go talk.
No, I was just going to follow along. There was an attempt to start a student community that failed. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think Sue's point that it's as a practical matter, it's not going to be.
I like Bill's idea.
Okay, thank you. So we have the endorsed versus vetted stipend. Patty, which one do you want to tackle first?
Let's do stipend.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
we had a good discussion in the RD's caucus meeting this morning. Most RDs, I would probably say all RDs would like to stay at the current stipend level. And furthermore, going forward, some consideration of having more discretion on how to use those dollars. And I think that's something that can be decided down the road. But for the moment, unless anybody would like to offer a contrary point of view, I'm endorsing the idea of staying with the current $1,500 RD stipend. We already have in our document that the RDs will attend EIJ, so they would use the money for that and other necessary travel. And as to how they're going to operate outside of this board, that's all TBA. And there's lots and lots of possibilities that are exciting. So they want to piggyback on that, on the dollar question?
I told as a former RD, who didn't have the money, but no, it's good because look, some regional coordinators are going to use all that $1,500 because their region is massive. They need to take airplanes to, or helicopters to wherever they, to see their chapters because it's huge. They just can't get into a car and drive. So it's crazy. So I mean, some regions are more compact and they're within an hour or two drive, to see the various chapters or various events or whatever. So, but just having the money is good. Again, what's not used goes back into the pot. So that's, I think, it's, let's not monkey with this. Let's not, give anyone fuel to, object to this or try to throw a wrench into this. So let's just, keep the status quo and, who uses the $1,500 for travel, great. Who doesn't, it goes back to Joe.
Does anyone have anything else to say about that? Otherwise, it looks like we'll keep that the way it is with policies. Or we'll change it to the 1,500.
That's not going to break the bank. It's budgeted now. So, yep. Yeah.
And then, Patty, we'll move on to the endorsed versus vetted. Do you want to talk a little bit
Sure.
about that language?
Sure. So I think we can find a word that everybody agrees to, both in spirit and in reality. So if endorsed is too strong and slate is not palatable, I'm not sure vetted does it for me either, but we're all wordsmiths, and I think we could settle upon a good word that communicates that these are people that have gone through a process. They have been, somebody has looked at their resumes, have talked to them. We're going to have this, this document that will guide the thinking of the nominations committee. So I don't have the right word, but I do endorse the idea of having endorsements. I do think that there should be some people on the ballot who have clearly gone through a process. That's kind of a key element here. So.
Paul maybe has a solution.
I think I have your word.
Okay.
Qualified.
But they have been.
That is a base level that you don't have highly qualified, minimally qualified, anything.
Okay.
It's just this is a candidate who has been deemed to be qualified to run for the board.
Deemed by the nominating committee.
I'm sorry.
By the nominating committee.
Andy?
I would rather see any kind of movement away from a value
Do you
judgment.
mind speaking up just a little?
Sorry. I'd rather see us move away from anything that's a value judgment. I think endorsed is too strong. I think vetted is even too strong. Something I heard Keane say, evaluated. I came up with reviewed, interviewed. You can make your own judgment about that. If they have been interviewed, they're on the ballot, that must mean something. But I'd like to see us stay away from anything that points people toward vote for this person. I think qualified still gets us there.
Bill?
Does nominated by the nominating committee get us there?
That's okay.
Thank you.
I guess if we have a nominating committee that's vetting a group of applicants, why aren't all the applicants being vetted through the nominating committee? So that it doesn't become we endorse this group or we don't endorse this group. Either you're qualified or you're not qualified.
Well, and I think maybe I'm misunderstanding. Wouldn't they vet everyone who puts their name in? The only people that maybe would not be are the people that maybe do it like on the floor or.
Right. Or beyond certain deadlines. I think this becomes a critical kind of detail. So somebody comes just in time to get their name in the literature on the website, whatever. And now does the committee have time to now put them through the paces that they put the other candidates who met a certain deadline? Probably not. So there's probably going to have to be like a drop dead deadline. If you want to be considered by the nominating committee and seek the support of, that might work, that's fairly neutral, the support of the nominations committee, you have to do it by X date. Otherwise, you are free to go forward with a from the floor campaign or what have you, I guess.
People are no longer allowed to run from the floor. That was changed a while back. They have to still declare so many days out. Most associations who have a process like this, they set a deadline so that anyone who declares, there's time that they go through the nominations vetting process. So most associations set those deadlines that if you want to run, this is the deadline by which you have to declare, and that is set so that there is plenty of time so that all candidates go through the process. And then the nominations committee, unfortunately, I think to Andy's point, does say, these are the types of people we're looking for. These maybe not yet, but you're still welcome to run on the ballot, just not with the recommendation of the nominations committee.
So
That's how it typically works.
I do give pause, I think sort of what Rachel, what you're saying, because I think absolutely vetting, and I think if they want to share that with the board, I'm fine with that, but I think sharing or putting like a gold star next to their name on a ballot gives me pause. Also as well, I think to me, the idea was, I guess I didn't think that it would go as far as Joe just described, that it would be more they talk to these people, they see who they are, and they maybe tell the board, you know, or share their thoughts, or that they are seeking people that the board says that they may want. And they're going after them, trying to get them to go through the process, but they're not giving like a gold star and like basically endorsing a slate. But Alex, I saw your hand.
Exactly. It's a free for all, and anyone can run. That's what we have now.
I think we can all understand someone didn't apply in time for the nominations deadline, but Patty, as I read your memo, anyone could still run as long as they applied by the deadline, and that would include, and at some point in the future, I would assume if the nominations committee is vetting, candidates who applied in time, went through the nominations process, but for whatever reason, the nominations committee did not want to recommend after vetting them, maybe they didn't think they were ready. Those people could still run, but they wouldn't be on the nominations slate. Isn't that the case?
That's kind of how we envisioned it. And so, I mean, kind of think about this. You're going to go through this process of having a nominations committee. You know, people go through a more rigorous process, fill out a, paperwork and so forth to apply. And then if the end result is they have their preferences and they go forward onto the ballot, but nobody knows, then really what's it all for? Right? Why even go through that process if you're not going to somehow specify that these are the people who have the qualifications that the nominations committee has confidence in? Right? So I understand it flies in the face of completely free and open elections that we're used to. But the idea here is to get, that this committee is going to do the work of trying to find people and bring them forward. And then it does seem as though there should be some sharing of that process with the folks who are voting.
Patty, I'm gonna go on for that. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go to Andy. I'm gonna go to Ethan. I'm gonna go to Paul. I'm gonna go to Gretzky. James, you have your hand up, and we'll come back. Okay. Andy.
Thank you. I think that what Lynn said really hits on what I was concerned about, and it's kind of crystallizing for me now. Maybe I didn't have it clear in my mind. I thought that the vetting process was a way to weed out people that are obviously unqualified. They just joined SPJ yesterday. Not that that's disqualifying, but you could have a pool of 5 people, 4 of them are deemed qualified or however we want to do it. But what we're talking about is no, we're going to make one pick among pools of people.
No. So again, if 20 names come forward and the nominating committee thinks 17 would be terrific picks, then all 17, if they wanted to go forward, maybe though you tell them you're one of 17, they go, I'll wait till next year then. So they could remove themselves at some point. We're really getting into the process here, but there's a lot of ways this could play out.
So we're not necessarily talking about like a gold star slate. This
Correct, right.
I think that's the key. It's the word.
Yes.
A slate, which is we have three open, we're picking 3 people versus we have these positions open. We're qualifying candidates, not a slate. So, and we use the term slate interchangeably here throughout the weekend, and maybe we should stop.
Yeah, let's take that off the,
Even?
and no gold stars. We're not going with gold stars. Okay?
Yeah, I just want to maybe think about this as a voter. I think as Eddie noted in her feedback that, no, don't tell members how to vote, but I just remember in the past that, I'd see this group of candidates and really not know anything about these people. Never heard of them before. I only see what's in front of me as qualifications. But if I have a nominating committee that's telling me like all these things about these people that have already been vetted, like that makes me help a more informed decision. So as a voter, maybe this is more helpful. I don't feel like you're telling me to vote, but I feel like I'm being equipped with the information to make an educated vote.
And I think I was going to go Paul Kretzky, Jane.
Yeah, I think, Andy, maybe you presented the reason why I wanted to say qualified, that there's a minimum level of qualifications so that you don't have somebody who joined yesterday or who hasn't held any kind of office or hasn't done anything but just thinks you need to run for the board. That person, I don't think any of us would say is qualified. Sure, they can. I mean, under the bylaws, they can, and they can run. We're not going to say they can't run, but it's a matter of it's meeting minimal qualifications to run for a seat. And I think endorsed. I agree that's a problematic word. I just think qualified sets, provides what you need to know.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
I think my problem with that, are we talking about objective standards or subjective? What is qualified? If you need to run, in order to run for board, you need to be an SPJ member for 5 years. A committee has checked that, yes. You meet that, you're qualified. Otherwise, if we don't have something like that, what is qualified? You're involved, what is involved? I mean, what standards become qualified?
That's a good point. Kretzky, Jane, go ahead.
I just was going to suggest that we use the word that Patty used before, confidence, that the nominating committee has confidence in these people. It's not saying we're, putting a gold star by their name, but we have confidence that these people will fulfill the duties of the office.
In the book that I'm sure all of you read, it wants a qualifying committee to make sure that not only is there minimum qualifications, but their disposition is correct for the board. And I think in a non-journalism or great trade organization like we cited in the book, that's an idea. There's a construction association for Central Ohio, I think. And I don't suppose there are a lot of philosophical debates that go on about plumbing, but maybe there are. Not plumbing plumbers. But for a journalism organization, I think one of the questions this board is going to have to answer when you get to the point of endorsing, if he's on the checklist, like Andy said, you are pretty much trying to set your tolerance for disruption on your board, whether you think that's good or bad, and there are different opinions. But that's the genesis of the idea. Am I correct? That's from the book. It's not just to tick off a list, it's just as much disposition as it is qualification.
I think the way that I look at this is like a job. So when I'm hiring a position, people have to meet certain minimum standards. But what I really want are people who go far beyond the certain minimum standards, who have experience, who have, they give indications that they're incredibly smart, that they're going to pick things up well, that they bring great ideas to the table. So when you're interviewing a candidate, I think for the board, it's the same concept. Yes, these people have the minimum standards that we require, whatever those might be. And in the packet that we shared, there's some language in there. These are the types of people we are looking for. Are they strategic? Are they this way? What examples do they have? So I think it's a combination of both. I think it's subjective and just checklist type stuff, because the goal is to get the right types of minds, not just the people who have done the stuff. And there's a big difference.
Well, yeah, if you're going to have more than one candidate for any one position, there's going to be subjectivity. Because it's always going to come down to personal preference when that vote is cast. But correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there already qualifications for the positions? Like, isn't there a description of like what you need to have done in order to,
For president-elect, there is.
oh, okay, well, I think there should
I'm
be.
trying to find it, I'm not coming up with it.
Yeah, there should be a public list of what we expect from each of those members in order for them to be on that board, so that the voters can see, in addition to whatever the nomination committee has come up with. So these are the parameters that the nomination committee is going by, outside of subjectivity. Objectively, these are the things that the committee is looking for. So I think that however we proceed forward with this, there needs to be a essentially job description for every single position on the board that varies. So yeah, I move that we.
Patty, what do you, I mean, not
Yeah,
to task
so-
your task force with.
Well,
but-
we decided as a task force that that absolutely is an essential part of it, but we as a task force shouldn't draft that.
Right.
That should be the job of the nominations committee. We provided some addendums here to get them started, some language that they might want to consider. So I think you have to go to the existing handbook of SPJ and see what we already require in terms of applying for particular positions, and then add on to it these more characteristics that are desired. And yes, absolutely, that needs to be available to all persons. It should live on a website, so anybody wants to see what's this nominating committee up to, how's it going to work, what document guides its work, all should be completely transparent.
Only
But our task force is not going to do that part.
president-elect is called out the bylaws.
We will be done come
I guess my
September.
question to that is do we think it would be worthwhile when we present this in September and are talking to chapter leaders, that if this comes up, that a group of us maybe work on some descriptions just to have them as examples that they may use?
Yes, and we have those at the ready, so that's no problem at all to share that with, as we go forward with a
Oh,
marketing
you guys
plan.
have already done that specifically?
Yeah, I mean, we
to
have
these
some examples that Joe pulled from other associations that give good language and good ideas as we move forward.
I guess
So,
I'm saying, do you think it'd be worthwhile if we did specific to SPJ?
Oh, yeah.
Because with the members appreciate that, and I'm actually thinking that maybe that's a good idea. Do we have any volunteers that maybe want to work on that?
well,
the
then
next
I
month?
can, in the revision of all this, we can work that in.
Are you sure?
But it could be, I could have that ready for when we have an online meeting. Is that what we're planning?
Are you
to-
sure? Because otherwise we can outsource that.
No, as long as it's after May 7th, I can, yeah.
Joe?
I might recommend that Patty, you reach out, maybe Paul, but maybe some people who've done past nominations process
Sure.
might be helpful in that too. But I don't want to volunteer Paul's time.
Pass me the baton.
Thank you. I do think that
Sonny
would be
back there
helpful.
too, volunteer him.
Alex, do you have?
No, mine was a follow-up clarification, but we moved on. At that point, Pat, I think it's all ask you later.
Andy?
Could you just restate what it is, what we're now trying to do with this?
Oh, so he was suggesting job descriptions.
Okay.
Would that kind of help? Because the nominations committee most likely would be looking for specific things for these positions. And would that make it clear, more clear to the people who are applying and to how the nominations committee is vetting if you have these in place? So my suggestion, and Patty has graciously accepted, is to make up specific job descriptions for the different new positions on the board, what those would be, so that we can have those as examples when we propose this and talk with chapters and talk to our members. And here's an example of what we would think the nominations committee would look for. Here's an example job description that could change. The nominations committee can change all that once it's in place, but just to provide an example.
Okay, I think it would be also helpful though, for us as a board to decide, is the intent of the nominating committee to make sure that there is a qualified pool, or to actually find people that we want to be on the board? And I think that matters, that makes a difference, because if we're talking about the nominating committee coming up with the people that we want, although anybody can run, the election becomes more of a ratification process, and that's what I'm worried about.
So you're saying if the nominations committee is going after and seeking people and asking them to run,
Right.
and then you also have people that are applying to run, and they would be talking to those individuals as well, you see that as ratification?
I think it is, because we're, right now, as Bill pointed out, there's a very minimal qualification for running for the board. But the voters themselves make the judgment about who is right. And if we're talking about the nominating committee now becoming kind of the standard bearers and putting up the pool, but anybody else can join, it's tilting the process toward the nominating committee's heads.
So.
That's how it's always been done.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know that.
well, so
The nominating committee has put forth the slate.
I'll go, I was gonna say something, I'm gonna let Paul talk and then I'll let Joe talk.
How is that any different from what I'm doing? Because, you know, I have, you know, I'm doing both in trying to find people that are going to be qualified, who have, you know, a certain level of interest and whatnot, people that have been active, the people who have been, you know, the biggest predictor of future success is past success. So you're looking for people who are, which it is like a hiring process, as Patty and Joe have said more than once. Trying to find people who are going to round out the board, people who bring certain qualifications. That's going to be no different when you have this 7-member group out there doing it.
Well, to me, the difference, actually, I'm agreeing with you. If you have done, you've done the work to put together a slate, and when the slate comes to the voters, they look at it and they make their decision. They have no idea who you recruited though. You've just done the legwork to make sure there's good people there. But what we're talking about now is some additional sign to the voters that tilts it toward the people that were recruited or vetted.
Oh, so
If we had no
I didn't think-
indication of how those people got there, then it's entirely up to the voters.
So it was my understanding though that that is not what would happen, that they would seek people out, because that is what we currently do now, which I actually support, because they're looking and that's what they're kind of there for. This diverse group is looking for these people to come.
Right.
They also have this pool of people who just apply on their own through, you know, the website or an email, that they're going to look at all of them together. The only people that they are going to, the only thing they are doing though is saying, we would think that they would be a good board member. They're not saying whether or not they picked them or not.
Why do we have to say anything at all about what the nominating committee thinks?
Joe?
This is one of the few philosophical questions about this process. This is not about process. It's not about procedure. This is a philosophical question of, do you believe members should have total authority, control to pick anyone ever without any vetting process at all? Because that's what we have now. Or do you believe philosophically the organization is better off by having a streamlined vetting process where people are interviewed for jobs and then put forth for positions? If you believe it should be completely, totally open, honest, like just wide open like we have now, that's your philosophy. The idea of trying to be more strategic is absolutely to recommend, find, and vet the best people and put them up front.
And that's where it becomes a ratification process.
So it's a philosophical, that's a philosophical, it's the same philosophical question of, should we be a representative model or should we look, you know, streamline and look for the people who the skills we really want? I don't know that you can have this, go down this path we're going and be completely effective if at the end of the day, you still end up at the place where anyone and everyone can run with no process.
Well, let's just not, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but let's stop calling it an election then.
Okay, do you know, Joe, doesn't ONA do a process like this? Is anyone in here in ONA? I think they vet a certain amount, don't they?
They do, and it's a cultural thing, I think. So I'd have to verify this. Michael, you may know because I know you know some people on the board. You have to be nominated by a member to get on the board, and then they go through the vetting process, and they tell people you're not quite ready. And the culture is they know the candidates who are going through this process, if they're not encouraged to run for the board, they're not going to get elected. So there is a vetting process and a nominations process that takes place to some extent.
I just wanted to throw that out there because I did think that that's
ONA does do that, mostly because they're a technical organization more than pushing safety press. So they want to make sure you have technical knowledge. When I joined ONA, you couldn't even join without proving that you work with online media. That's changed over the years. And I think that's the philosophical point we get to. My wife is part of the organization that's very technical. There's no other issues besides besides technical, what Joe is proposing works just fine, because at the end of the day, you want certification, you want that organization to get certain technical standards. I think at SPJ, we've already redefined our role, and Joe's helped with this, right? Which is we're pushing for free press, we're pushing for ethics. We're not going to go technical, we're not going to go whether minority organizations or technical organizations. If free press and ethics are our thing, I don't think you can go with that model of kind of limited elections. We're going to vet you for membership, because that's not what this organization is now trying to become. We're trying to become this fighter organization, and to have a board structure that works perfectly well in a technical setting, I think will turn people off in an open setting. And I would actually pose this hypothetical question. If I'm just envisioning this new process, say you have someone that has, I don't know, a lot of qualifications, but might be a little bit of a pain in the ass. How do you, what's that organization going to do? What's your value of disruption? And I don't even want to be on the board.
I would endorse you, Gretzky. If you're asking whether I would endorse you, I would endorse you every time, 100%.
I would give you a gold star.
So I'm saying that like my fear, and Andy's fear, although he's a rebel, is this
It's a secret.
that vetting process with a new board. The board shrinking, we all approve, but a smaller board might be more insular. We already talked a little bit about that. And if you add on top of that a process by where you could become even more insular, I think you have the efficiency that Joe wants, but I don't know if you have the verb that we all want.
Matt, I think I saw your hand up, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad this discussion is happening. I think it's pretty integral. But also, if we're talking about deal breakers and how to frame it for skeptics, I would kind of flip the script a little bit. We're talking about qualified. I think that's a good thing to do. But I would say we're not keeping people out of the pool. We're saying you have to have a swim to be in the pool. And I think we frame it like that. And I think anyone who's a skeptic, you're a skeptic. So I'm asking if you think that would work for you. I think many people that would resonate with you. The second thing is, a lot of the concerns I had before coming here was about the past president's role. I think it's important that this, and I was a principal nominating committee, but now I think past president needs a role. This is a good role. And I think that combining those two things, I think it takes a lot of the resistance or opposition, I think, off the table. So again, I think that how you frame this is important. And again, when I think of it, it's not like we're walking around with a scepter saying, yes, you. We're saying there's 20 people there for 3 seats, 17 are qualified. We just are telling you that you can swim, so you can go in the pool. The other person who doesn't know how to do a doggy paddle, sorry, you cannot, you're not qualified. And I think to Patty's point about objective and subjective qualifications, it sounds like we're going to work towards having a list that says, here are some things to consider as you're talking about whether these folks are qualified or not. That's my 2 cents. I don't know, does that work for you, framing like that, or you still have reservations?
I still have reservations. Yeah. What is qualified?
Yeah, and so that's,
Yeah,
and I think that's what my concern was a few minutes ago, was to make sure that, Paul was saying, in stating that these candidates would be qualified, that they meet a minimum list of qualifications. And I think that we would need to establish what that minimum is, and that it would need to be available to everyone so that everyone knows what that minimum is. And then going forward, those candidates that are pushed into the slate or whatever it is that we're calling it, everyone knows that, regardless of whether there's support or not, we know that all of these candidates meet these minimum qualifications. And so I think that, I don't think this process with the nomination committee, I don't think it's necessarily putting a gold star or however it is that we're framing it. I think it is, like Matthew was saying, is that we're removing the folks who should not be candidates. And I think that if we stop looking at it from this perspective of the nomination committee as like choosing their own group of guys that they want to be on the board, I think it's less that and more like what you were saying. And so I don't see this as a ratification process, considering that everyone that we look at would be would have to meet a bare minimum across the board. And so I don't think that it's necessarily a ratification process. I think it's more, I think that this actually is both fair and clearer than what we're doing now.
Well, if you can show me standards that we're trying to meet that are concrete.
Right, and
then
so that's
I'll
I think
we'll start to come around.
That's
and
what
that's
Patty and Paul are gonna work on.
exactly, and that's why I brought that up.
Yeah,
That we would have
he
to
raised a good point in that, you know, what is it you look for? Experience, you know, activity on behalf of SPJ, all the different things that we kind of already informally do. I think having them in the list, and I do think transparency as to what it is that the nominating committee would be looking at is important as well.
But let me just continue on the devil advocate role. And if we're looking for, let's just pick some numbers. You were a chapter president, yes or no? You've been a member of SPJ 10 years, yes or no? And you present that to voters. I mean, are we saying that voters can't tell that on their own? That the nominating committee has to say, hey, by the way, look at that. I'm just not sure I understand the point of that.
I wouldn't even get that formulaic, Andy. I mean, I think, you know, it's one of those where information about a candidate, we can, you know, and again, this is absolute logistics. We could set it up so that when we have the election, you list stuff like that, and everybody is upfront about that, because now you write this how many word statement that just says, I really love journalism and I want to work hard on behalf of SPJ. And, you know, you don't give a list of what it is you've actually done or accomplished on behalf of the organization.
I don't agree with that.
Well,
That's
some
what
people do and some people don't, though. If you do look at the descriptions, some people do not go into detail and some people do give something that's very kind of vague, and you're like, oh, they sound like they've done a good job, and then they don't really do anything. Patty, I'm gonna let you, because I know our time's almost up.
Yeah, so I think we can work all this out. I think the question really at the moment is what we do with the nominations process, right? If we go through this process and we set up a way that we all agree brings the best candidates to the forefront, then do we tell people that we think these are the best people, or don't we? Right? And we can figure out the word. If we say yes, we tell, we figure out the word. If we say no, we don't tell, then we don't tell. However, I'm going to tell you that it's going to happen anyway, right? And I would rather be more upfront. It's going to happen because people are going to go, oh yeah, the nominations committee was really impressed with that person. It's going to happen in an organic way, in a way that doesn't feel as authentic to me, because it's not on the table, it's not on a website, it's not the gold star, the asterisk, the word, whatever. So I think that's the question. And I'm just going to now make my exit. I want to thank everybody for really, really thoughtful conversation and input. And I'm thrilled that it went as it did. I'm very happy that we're going this direction. And I think really everything else is detail. And we will get that done, because we always get stuff done, because that's who we are. So thanks very much.
Yes,
I'm going to exit it now.
And the way we will, and we can continue the conversation, and I can take notes for Patty if there are some other policy things that we want to talk about with this work. And Andy, if there's something you want to say related to that again.
Well, I'll just real quick on what Paul was saying. We have bios in Quill where you are asked to fill out information on a number of categories, such as SPJ experience. There is not just opportunity, but clear pointing toward here's what you need to do. If somebody doesn't know enough to list that, I don't think somebody needs to rescue them and gather that for voters. I mean, that's a sign. You don't know how to put yourself forward. I'm sorry, you just lost a lot of credibility.
Thank you. With this next, we will, Patty will kind of regroup on some of this bylaws. Obviously, we'll see it again. The idea is that we would have, you'll definitely see some chatter, either Slack and email, kind of working through some of these as their drafts. So please, I would ask, definitely respond, be responsive. But ideally, we would have a call, Joe, what do you think, June?
Yeah.
Okay.
there's a deadline, but before which the bylaws have to get out. I think it'd be smart to have a call before that.
Yes. So we can kind of refinalize the changes that the bylaws committee comes up with what we voted on, then also make sure that we are all on board with some of these policies. And then at that time, I think we would start asking for help with reaching out to chapter leaders, not necessarily delegates yet, because we won't know who those people are, but definitely chapter leaders, members in your regions. So I just want to kind of get that as timeline set. Joe, go ahead.
I was just going to make one more comment, but I'm not sure it's the right place, about this topic of how does the nominations process work. At the end of the day, what this is it's a trust issue. And our members don't trust any elected bodies ever, even their own. And that's what we're facing here. At our core, anyone should be able to run all the time. It's best for America if everybody can do it. Maybe not the most strategic way though to lead an association if you're trying to be the most relevant journalism association in the country. So when you go back and you talk to your constituents and you talk to your groups, your challenge is going to be that. It's the journalistic beliefs that we hold versus what's best for the association. And depending on how you feel, you may feel that the complete openness is best for the association because that's who we are. Or you may feel that it's most best to be more strategic and handpick your leaders because that's what can propel the association forward the fastest. And that's the dynamic that we're dealing with as a journalism association. So I just wanted to share my perspective. So if that helps you in conversations you might have as you talk to people, this is going to be I think this will be the biggest hurdle is how our board members chose and not what should the board look like. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Does anyone else have anything else on that, or are there other policy things or things that you saw in Patty's memo that you wanted to talk through, discuss? Bill?
Can I ask a question? You keep referring to Patty's memo, which means something was sent out overnight.
No. This is the one that she sent out. Okay. That was in the board materials.
Okay, there was nothing sent out overnight?
Well, there was there were questions that were sent out, but those were related to the bylaws.
I didn't get those. Is there anyone else here who didn't get them?
Same thing.
Still the AOL.
But on the reply all, we did get it. So
Yeah.
Task force items this morning, I believe.
Right. But it's just an AOL problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. No, because yesterday there was some discussion in the lobby of the hotel, oh, I didn't get that either. And those were not AOL customers, so I wondered if it was more than that. So this proves it's just AOL.
I would ask
We'll deal with it.
I would ask that the nominating committee not ask candidates if you use AOL because
We don't do that public.
No, the end is all Steve apply.
Were there any other, when you're going through any other policy things or things that you saw that you thought we wanted to talk about here?
Well, there's one thing, but we kind of addressed it in our region, regional caucus. Number 4 on this list, should regions be assigned to at-large board members? Patty's kind of answered it for us, and when I first read that, when we first talked about it, it sounded like there would be a contact that our members could get a hold of, but now it sounds like it's more that there's somebody on the board that us as regional coordinators can get in touch with if we have.
Yeah, so that line, let me see if I can find it again, because it's in her memo, but we could definitely ask her, and maybe I think she already wrote this down to be specific. Yeah. Here it is. Oh, establish an organizational chart to assign SPJ constituencies to specific board members. So to me, that's where that would apply, and I think Patty was going to work, and I'll make sure she does to make it more specific.
Yeah, I think Eddie had a big issue with that one, so I just wanted to bring that one up.
Anything else? Okay, if other things, like I said, do come up, or if you're reading this, reading SPJ material on the way home, so exciting. Definitely don't hesitate. Reach out to Patty. Send an email to the board. Go on the Slack channel. We can continue these conversations. And as Patty gets new language and works with Paul on some of those descriptions, bylaws things come down. Again, just be looking for those. I'll probably, when they come down via email, also post in Slack, but I'll make sure that everything also is sent out via email, because I know not everyone uses Slack as readily or as often. So I guess with that, we can move forward to the last item on our agenda. I believe it's the last item, which are the committee reports. Hopefully everyone read them. Does anyone have any comments, questions about any of them? Does anyone have any new business or anything else they want to add or talk about? Yes,
Kretzky had brought up the whole issue of having a discussion about diversity of our board member, and I don't know if that was just, I don't know if we want to go there. I don't necessarily want to go there, but talking about, you know, ages and.
What did he?
Do you guys remember that email that he sent out? Yeah, I think I may have intimidated him at this. Okay. I just thought it was something I said, well, we can talk about it at the board meeting if we want to, just sort of got pushed under there, and I'm fine not addressing it.
She used her New Jersey.
It's not on committee reports, but Bob Becker pointed out that we probably ought to have, once we get our final changes to bylaws and all, we ought to have it vetted by Baker and Hostetler because of the uniqueness of the Illinois state law. Just make sure that these ideas of appointed directors and all apply, and God forbid they say no.
Yeah, I haven't.
So do you think there will be?
No,
okay.
no. Illinois state law requires you to have president, secretary, or treasurer, and then like one other director, two other directors. So before the task, I looked at all that stuff before the task force made its proposal.
Okay.
But we will do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree.
Andy, did you have something?
Yeah, I seem to remember, and King, maybe you brought this up in the diversity committee report. There seemed to be an open-ended question about what some obstacles they were having, and is there maybe a need to answer that question here?
Well, I think this, and Robert is in the room, it's a conversation that he and I have not had a chance to have, but to kind of sum it up, please, Keem, feel free to jump in. I think what we had was a situation where we had a very active and extremely excited diversity committee that wanted to jump in and make changes and make something better. And that was the intention. And I think they did a great job asking around, making recommendations. The issue, though, that we have is that SPJ does not control the Diversity Fellow program. That's an SDX program. So I think one, and I will take part responsibility for some of this, is if I also was not clear is that if the diversity committee is working on all of this and makes all these recommendations, well, do they just automatically happen? Do they have the power to make that happen? I just assumed, yes, we would move forward with it. But SDX has the power to do that. So then they made these recommendations. Some were accepted, some were not. They felt like, oh, we worked on all of this. Maybe we weren't heard as clearly as we should have been. But again, I think it was some miscommunication, some not being clear about what the roles are. And Keem, feel free, I know you reported that.
Yeah, I think it was just unclear. So from my perspective, it seemed as if we were tasked to resolve the issues that the fellowship had been facing. Some of those problems were that, we weren't keeping in contact with any of the fellows after they finished their tenure. A lot of them were a little unsatisfied with the way that we were managing whatever happens after that point, after the fellowship ended. Not many of them went on to assume leadership roles in the organization. Another issue was that I think we had trouble even knowing who most, if not all of them are, all of which are things that are extremely problematic, considering that we're spending money to have these folks come to the convention. So the concern that I had during the first board meeting when Maggie and I assumed this position was that the board's role on SPJ is to make sure that we are spending money the right way. And I didn't think from this outset, before I even knew what the problems were about the fellowship, I had strong reservations about the way we were handling it. But now that I do know, they are even stronger, that we have done a very poor job of managing that fellowship. And I think that it is a very sad situation considering the way that it started. And so I think what needs to happen going forward is, in order to resolve the issues that the fellowship is facing, it needs to be clearly communicated whose responsibility that is. And whoever has those responsibilities, they need to, it needs to be, it just needs to be clear who has the authority to make those changes. And those changes need to be carried out regardless of whether it's done by the Diversity Committee, SPJ Board, or SDX, because it's pretty much wasting money. We're just finding a handful of people to come to convention, and then that's it. I think that we could be using that fellowship amongst several other opportunities that we provide to our members to solve a lot of the other issues that we're facing. Like I was talking to them yesterday about the fellows, they're already journalists. We could be using those fellows to provide content for Quill. We could be having members on the board, as long as it's as large as it is, to serve as like mentors or have a kind of pathway to running for a position either at the local level or the national level. I just don't think that our expectations of the fellows are clear, nor do I think that it is effective when we consider the goals of the organization in the first place. So I think that we just need to completely revamp the way that the fellowship has been handled. And where the frustrations came in was that a lot of those recommendations that the committee put forward, at least in my view, from the ones that I saw, address those issues. Maybe not all of them, but we definitely tackled a good bit of the issues that the fellowship has been facing. And from what I understand through the Slack channel, a lot of those things were not taken or not accepted. And so that's where the conflict is. The conflict is we have these issues with the fellowship that needs to be changed, but no one knows who can do them or how to go about doing them. And so, yeah.
So I'll say a couple things, and then Robert, if you want to, yes, and Chris, feel free to. You know, some of them were, but not all of them were. And I do think we do have some of the recommendations from the Diversity Committee are happening, some are not. I do think there was, and I think still is if we want the Diversity Committee involved in this, do they have power to kind of make changes? So that's still a question that is still unanswered in my mind and not clear. So that's where I will hand it over to Joe, Chris, or Robert.
I would disagree with much of what team has communicated. And I'm not sure where some of the information came from, how it was translated. The fellowship can always be improved, any program can be improved, but we do know that a significant portion, and I don't have the figures at my fingertips, of folks who have gone through the fellowship have served in leadership position on this board. Rebecca Talent is one of them.
I've got some old figures here, if that would help.
Yeah, I have some figures specifically for the fellowship.
2014, we had discussion at the SDX board meeting. So I guess we could go back to that meeting.
We have more recent figures than that. Chris compiled some figures last September. Do you remember the numbers off the top of your head?
And that,
but there was a significant number in the more recent one. There was a significant number who have served either on this board in committee roles as committee chairs. We don't keep track of how many have served in a chapter role. And then, of course, there's the interesting folks like, well, I think Chris pulled out as an example Sam Stewart, who has not held any elected position, has not chaired a committee, but has been a significant contributor to SPJ, member of the membership executive or planning session. He's been very involved with us and working on Dr. J, Journalists on Call. So I think we can point to plenty of folks who have gone on. There are improvements that need to be made in continuing the work throughout the year. I don't recall that that was in any of the recommendations that came to me from the committee. The primary holdup was the fellowship was created to encourage racial diversity in SPJ's national leadership. We have 6 people in this fellowship each year. That's how much the program budget handles. The major point of the recommendation that came to us was to expand it to make being female a eligibility requirement, which completely changes what the program is. Completely changes. I forwarded it to an ad hoc committee of diverse members of the SPJ board, who unanimously came back and said, we like these other ideas, we don't like this one, because it did change it. If there were suggestions from the diversity committee on improving follow-up, I think we'd be very interested in seeing those. I think that there are ways to improve. I have lunch with the fellows each at convention. There's very little interaction between the fellows and the members of this board. And this is really where I think they can have the most impact is in visiting with you. And I would like to see some improvement in how that is handled. I think that's coming clearly that the diversity committee can suggest.
Joe, do you want to jump in and say? Because I think the only thing I will say is my concern, because Robert, there were some suggestions, and I think some of them were implemented into this. I could be wrong. I have to look back through and see exactly what some of the changes were, besides the female. Because they did have some recommendations about how to get fellows more involved. But I think to me, the concern is to task a group of volunteers who got very excited about this, were very impassioned, really dug in, really did the research, talked to some of these other fellows, made connections, actually had conversations with them, and came back with feeling that fellows didn't feel as connected to SPJ as maybe we would want them to be. That was kind of what the feeling was. So they did all this work, and we're saying, oh, let's go back to the diversity committee. Yet they've done this, but then we're kind of told.
I've not seen any of whatever work they did on increasing connections. I've not seen any of that.
So Joe, go ahead. That's kind of my concern is that.
I'm going to answer just big picture, and then I'm going to let Chris. Chris was the one who actually works with the committee on this program. And this is going to minimize every emotion about this, and I recognize that this is very important. I see this as a very simple growing pain. Years ago, SPJ used to apply for a grant from the foundation for this program, and there were requirements within the grant that was written. This is the purpose of the program. This is why we want the money. Will you support this program? And the foundation supported the money moved to SPJ. So in that regard, the diversity committee, based on the grant request, had total control of the program. A few years ago, when we started breaking down the walls between SPJ and the foundation took over programming, the diversity program, fellowship program, stayed on their books. So at that point, it became a foundation-managed program, more so than a grant-funded program on SPJ. The culture, however, of how the program is changed, adapted, whatever, has not changed. The diversity committee still kind of drives some changes that it wants to see. We had never had a situation before where a request came that everybody thought, ooh, this might be different. So this was something that had never happened before. Could have come up in either the year before, even, or 2 years, but right after we made the transition. We're going to have more of these. Somewhere down the line, we're going to have more of these communication problems where, as SPJ and the foundation learn to work closely together in ways they never have before. I see this as a simple growing pain, albeit a very frustrating one for those involved. And we're going to be working through a lot of these things over the coming years. So with that said, I'm going to get away and I'll let Chris answer some of the specific questions.
If you want me to, I mean, I do want to keep going, Lynn. I know you want my topic to drag out too long. So.
I mean, I think to me the bigger picture issue here is, and this is something that I think it's not just SPJ, in this case, it's not just SPJ's job to answer, but as SPJ president, when I do have I oversee the committee chairs, and they put a lot of work into this, I am very hesitant to say, and Robert, I'm grateful, and I do think the diversity committee can be really great in helping with this program, but I am very hesitant to say, go ahead and help with this again, because they don't have the power to make any it changes if they do come up with something that they think is great, and we just say, let's try it for a year. So that's for me kind of the issue is I would, and I don't, maybe this is, not the place, but it is kind of, it came up, Michael had brought this up too, I think, what do our committees have power to do? And this is a little bit different, but in this case, you really don't have the power and they're working hard to do it. So I would honestly suggest them to say, go somewhere else right now, because they've already dove down this, path, and they are frustrated with it. And I wouldn't say, oh, come help them again with the diversity fellowship again.
I think that's valid, and maybe the solution is that is no longer an SPJ diversity committee program.
Yeah.
Like, that may be the solution.
Well, but see, I feel like I served as the liaison between the committee and the foundation. And so Dory, hey, we want to make sure there's more connectedness to the fellows. I said, that's great. She said, we want the program. I said, that's great. When she said something that to me potentially changed the whole purpose of, not purpose, but the
intent,
the original intent, I went, you know what? Let me check with Robert on that. So I have a different perception. I have a perception that they are plugging along and everything was cool and she was running and I was saying, yeah, we're all good. And then we hit something that I thought was a red flag. I used judgment call, checked in with somebody, and what they were hoping to do didn't happen. But that was, to me, the women thing is here, and all these other changes are here, and all these other improvements.
And are those other suggestions being implemented? Because you didn't bring them to me, you don't need to bring those kinds of
She
things.
just said we want to be more connected to the fellows, and I said we've always wanted that, and we just hadn't really gotten it from the committee. So if this is the group to do it, that's fantastic. But
Well, let me,
no,
Well, my understanding was that, and perhaps I was wrong, that the diversity committee was essentially like an advisory panel to SDX on the diversity fellows. They didn't control it. They were there in an advisory capacity.
Well, it's very much like what, excuse me for interrupting, it's very much like what Joe said.
Yeah.
They started out as a diversity committee program funded through a grant from SDX.
Mm-hmm.
It is swapped over with the change in our responsibilities. It's one of many growing pains we're likely to have.
And with an advisory committee, it's like sometimes you think this is the 10 things we want to do, and that's the advisory. You are advising. It's like this is what we're going to do. This is what we advise SDX to do. SDX can take all 10 of those suggestions, 9 of those suggestions, 2 of those suggestions, or none of those suggestions. I guess part of the frustration about being an advisory committee is that sometimes your advice isn't taken. Sometimes, not 9 pieces of it are and 1 isn't. I mean, that's sort of, you know what I'm saying? And it can be frustrating, because if you really want this one idea to be accepted and it's not, you're just like, Arr! But that happens. That's, that's part about the frustration about being, I've been on advisory committees and I know the feeling, but that's sort of, you got to roll with the punches a little bit that way. But throw up your hands and say, we don't want anything to do with this anymore because something we wanted wasn't the SDX was just like, nah, we're going to pass on that. It's just, I don't think it's a good way to go either.
well, so I think because there were suggestions that were made, so I'll make sure that, I don't have them with me, but I'll make sure that maybe you have those.
We'll just give Dory a call next week.
Yeah.
Isn't that the simplest thing here?
Yeah.
Call her.
No, that'd be great. I think, so I think, Annie, to answer your question, they just are looking, okay, should they still be involved in this? And I think they want to be, just in what capacity. But if there are other things that the board would like the committee to focus on, they are open to a new project or a new challenge that is something SPJ related. That's how I would put that.
I think it was probably just unclear that the role was advisory.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that was just unclear. But one of the things that I just wanted to say really quickly, from the Slack channel, just a second, I'm trying to find. So I summed up with the discussion, where we come up with the discussion. So this is based off the information that was provided to us within the Slack channel of the diversity committee on Slack. SDX selection committee chooses fellows. Diversity committee can only suggest changes. This is what we realized after after the entire process. 59 fellows to date. In the 2015 survey, 44 received it, 20 completed, 25 lapsed, 1 deceased. Approximately 4 of 59, aka less than 8%, have assumed leadership positions. The fellows asked for more programs with other organizations, follow-ups after the conference, and converting people to SPJ leadership. We do not know / have data on the nature of the fellowship's diversity, as in we don't know the demographics of those fellows. And then fellowships used to have mentors and 1-year assignments. They no longer have those things. And there were no minutes from the ad hoc committee meeting to address the proposals that we submitted. And so I think those were my issues. And those were the things that I noted from the entire process of conversations that the committee had. And so, I just wanted to make sure that those things get stated and communicated. But yeah, I think the biggest issue was just that no one was aware of the role that the committee had from the start. But yeah, I totally agree with what everyone else was saying.
Thank you. So Andy, does that help us?
Yeah, sorry if I.
But with that, I will say, if you do have ideas or, like I said, projects or something that you would want the diversity committees help with, they are open and are eager to have something new to work with. So that was part of it as well.
I brought that up because the last sentence was, we look to the SPJ board for help with this, and I just don't like unanswered questions. I didn't know if it had been addressed. Maybe I picked it a scab, sorry. I did want to bring up one other thing, and this is real short because Ethan just reminded me. It's, I guess, 1.5 years, almost 2 years, we've had this slow-moving attempt to try to negotiate better rates on a contest platform. I think the idea is still good. The execution is really tough. I know that Joe is struggling with it a bit, and I totally understand because this is the most literal definition of herding cats I've ever seen. It's so hard to get chapters to agree to the same things and also just to respond when we need them to respond. This needs to be quick responses on things as they change, and everybody has to get back in touch and say, yes, that's me, or else we lose numbers, and that's been happening. I don't know that there's an answer for it. I'll go back to everybody and explain it, see if somebody wants to try to revive this, but we're probably close to dead on this idea.
The only other thing I had, a plug to Billy's book from Michael. I think this is Michael's book, so now he's gone, so you have to bring it back. I already have one. I actually already have one. I bought them as Christmas gifts for people, but it is a very cool book. It is online, and the illustrations are really amazing. So it's so for those that you can't read it, these are my friends on politics. Yeah, good book. So,
I'm sorry, I just have something really quick related to membership that I want everyone to think about. So I know in my region, we have had several deactivated chapters that are primarily campus chapters, and I don't know if that's a national problem, but part of the reason I joined the board was to try to give a voice to campuses that don't have chapters and reaching out to students who maybe not be affiliated with any SPJ clubs or chapters or anything. So yeah, I'm wondering through if like Mark of Excellence, I don't know, I know our students always enter that even though we don't have a chapter, if there's ways that we can reach out to student members without tying us to communicating only to chapters and trying to find ways to bring in more student members in other ways, because we are losing student chapters. And
Not having a chapter?
they don't have chapters, yeah.
So that, I mean, that's an anthem. We all
Yeah.
face that because they graduate, they're a bunch of friends, they graduate, there's
And
no
then
chapter
nobody,
anymore.
yeah, there's no
And then you
continuity.
get back to the freshmen, and then
Exactly.
some schools.
But
are
let me
more
add another
welcoming.
layer to that, the advisor problems.
Yes.
Right.
There's no consistency in that. They come, they go academically, I don't care. It's not my thing. But there are folks who have an academic load, and those of you who are in academics understand that you get no extra credit for being an advisor. So that's a disincentive for chapters.
Yeah.
I think, and we know this, it needs to be tackled, but it's a complex issue.
One strong thing is they have a pro chapter, like in Minnesota, Minneapolis chapter, does an intern night. And the students come from schools from Wisconsin, all through Minnesota because they get to come and they get 5 minutes with the news director, with a PR person, and they get internships that way and draw them in. And, you know, they may join, they talk to them about a chapter, but, you know, they're way to do that through pro chapter.
Yeah, I think utilizing the pro chapter is essential for that because that benefits them later if they're able to rope in students who are interested in being in SPJ and being involved in SPJ. When they graduate and stick around, they have a place to go. There's a built-in community already there for them. So I think that's definitely beneficial.
The second part of our membership strategic plan that came out of Scottsdale a couple of years ago was this concept of, we call it internally lifers, taking journalists from cradle to grave, all through their thing, and a big part of that is students. And so I just asked Tara how far she's gotten on, because students are next up on our list because of that. And she said that's on her May calendar, and it's not May yet, but a heavy student focus related to membership is right around the corner.
I know in DC, we tried, it didn't work, we tried offering pro members to the campuses that had lost chapters, to see if one of our members could be the advisor, which is certainly legal and all. And unfortunately, you didn't get much take from the deans.
We've done that.
But it would have eased
We did that with Wisconsin, like a pro member who was formerly ran Eau Claire, which was one of the best student chapters in the country. And we said, yes, you, Lucas Graves, are the advisor officially. But you know what, Brianne, you run the chapter. You make sure they get, you're the liaison. Lucas Graves still has to be officially the advisor, but he didn't care. So therefore we were allowed to do it because you're right, sometimes advisors just don't have the time. And it's, you know.
So the academic was still the advisor, but someone else was in there helping him with the work.
He works with their president and creating, you know, committees and all of that.
I've been, as a chapter advisor, it's very hard to sustain campus chapters just because students go through the process and there's limited things they can do. So I talked a little bit to Tara about that, but ways we can reach out specifically to meet their needs.
One thing as you all kind of think about this, the last, I think 5 or 6 people that have had this discussion all said chapter. We have to crack that nut, and I think we started it when we were in Scottsdale of overall it is a membership. Student chapters will strengthen, I think, the student membership overall, but I don't think we can put all our eggs in that basket. We really have to think about globally, how do we address students, those who are and are not in chapters. So as you think through suggestions or ideas or whatever, just keep that kind of like in mind, that we need to look at the whole picture and not just those small little nuggets.
I would say a lot of that's going to depend on the support from the individual institutions too. Because some are responsive and others frankly don't give a shit.
Are we planning, Tara, and I know you kind of haven't started this yet, but are we planning, or do you need maybe help or assistance from some of our campus representatives to start maybe reaching out and compiling lists of who would be the best contact at universities and doing that outreach?
Yeah, so once we get started, I'll definitely loop those of you. And if anybody's interested in helping with anything like that, just shoot me an email. Even if you just have a random idea in the middle of the day, I kind of file all those things away and they're good to go back to. But yeah, as soon as we get this kind of focused in May, I'll reach out.
Just 2 other things, one kind of micro, one macro. I know that Patty on the budget presentation had talked about adding percentage for variance. I want to second that. That would be super
Okay, it's in my notes.
And then also, someone actually in my another chapter, if I rephrase this, is there a way to put year-to-date actuals in there rather than so we're looking at last year's budget versus this year's budget? And you do a great job of keeping us informed and kind of going forward throughout the year.
Yeah.
Right. Someone had mentioned that to me, so I thought I'd pass it along. So that's an easy thing to add.
When it's the actuals are impossible to do for the budget purposes. Because when we put that budget together, it happens in February, March, and you guys see it in April. And I would actually like the budget approval to start happening in July, but it's always been done at this meeting. But we're projecting expenses and revenue 18 to 24 months out because of the timing of that budget. So putting actuals in there where we are as of that date compared, it's impossible.
I'll go back and tell
We
you.
do use the actuals, however, when we're coming up with those estimates. So we will look at what did we do last year, and then how are we tracking up through, if I'm working on January 25th, how are we tracking through January 25 in our actual? That helps me see maybe trends.
Yep.
So I use them when I put together those numbers, but including them on the document it's unhelpful.
Okay, that's fine. That makes total sense. I think the person will understand that.
Yeah.
The macro thing, I came up yesterday on some passing, but it's an issue in San Diego because I think we had like 650 people enter our contest last few years, and this year we didn't come close to that. Just by the last minute push, I think we got 500 we were happy with. And talking to people, I think that's the consensus, the trend. And I know we talked on a national level of changing our contests. I just wondered, where are we in that process? And how is the timeline for that? Because I do think that this is one way to keep people involved in the organization, right?
Yeah. We're nowhere in that process, other than some people saying we need to take we talk about awards. We need to take a long, hard look at our programs in general. The things that Abby Martzel, who had managed our awards, and she's doing it again in the interim, we see barrier to entry as a big problem. Not necessarily cost, but time of the people who are trying to enter. Time is the problem, we think, is a big one. And so I think there needs to be a big picture discussion about, A, are we giving away the right awards, right? We always review the categories at the end of each year, though. But what are we requiring when people submit? Organizations, big news organizations used to have departments. That was their job, was to submit awards entries. And then they had people. And now you're asking the individual journalists to make the time to enter. So I think we need to take a long, hard look at what are we requiring, and is what we're doing relevant anymore? Like, I think SPJ should have a huge strategic conversation about its awards. Is it time to not have MOE anymore? Is it time to do away with awards? Like, I think we start there and then work our way down. And I'm not advocating for any of that, by the way. That's a question that should be asked. The other piece that I'm curious to see, Matt, and I think Lynn may have mentioned this, I would like to go back and track our entries on election years and see if every 4 years we notice a drop because people don't have time to enter. I don't know if you have that ability, if you have that data that goes that far back, but I'm going to look at that and see if that, and it's easy to, it sucks, but it's easier to plan for it, you know, it's coming.
Is there, have other journalism organizations, because I know for me, like with the SPJ local, there was just no way, because I think I got several emails, I was out of town, and they're like, NBC hasn't applied, and that's because normally I do it for my team, and I had no time.
Yeah.
So I sent an email to my team, and I said, if you're going to do this, you have to do it on your own. They ended up doing it, but it was still last minute. But can we, or would there be interest in the national journalism organizations, like having one forum? Like, I only have to cut this video one time. I only have to write this 750 thing one time. It's like 500, 300, 750. Like, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
I don't want to be a cold bucket of water, but that's never going to happen.
It would be so much
It sounds
easier on the
really
users.
good.
We can't get chapters within SPJ that agree on that. Like,
Well, I mean, we're talking about different contests, different things that they categorize and different groupings and so forth. I would like it, but
Yeah, but word counts and voting videos, that doesn't sound like rules, that's just making it easier. If the federal government can produce a form that all universities agree to use for federal aid, this must be doable.
and maybe I think to that extent where it could be exact, maybe not, but I do think maybe it's worthwhile to look at what the majority of groups ask and require, and maybe we learn from what they're doing and we change our processes as opposed to trying to get everybody on board and have the 65 journalism associations decide what's going to be on this form. But I think it's a good place to question. Yeah.
Some do B and C. And I mean, all the contests we enter in the Midwest are all on one. They enter one, you just take it, boom, go to the next.
Oh, see, ours, because it's little things, but it's like, oh, the time limit for, like, specifically for video. One has a 10 limit, one has a 13 minute, one is 7 minutes. The word count is 300, 250, 500, 750, 1,000. You know, so then it's like, it is the same thing that you're entering in the same system, but you're cutting a video 500 times for the same story.
Well, you can always send in the minimum, you know, if 350 is the lowest,
Who's the lowest?
give everybody 350 words, and if 7 minutes is the lowest, give everybody 7 minutes.
Let me tell you about some of the negotiations we have about TV stations that want the max and then the max plus and what they can send in on their videos.
Well,
And they
if they knew that the judges didn't look at but 3 minutes,
And
they'd
they know
put
well,
that.
most judges do not spend the entire time looking, nobody's got that money.
That's what I should tell them. Hey, nobody's gonna watch it anyway. How about it?
All the records and serve the judge just once.
I just have a question on contests. I had a chapter in my region that has just thrown in the towel on their contest, and they had a huge contest for many years. But a large and shall remain nameless newspaper organization that I will give the pseudonym Satan, bought a very large newspaper in their state, and their entries dropped by 1/3 in a year, and they've just said, okay, we're going to find other ways to make money. Has that happened in anybody else's region? Do you know of a chapter that's
The
just
Washington DC chapter never gets an entry from the Washington Post. So you have these supplemental papers every year winning first prize. It doesn't embarrass the Post. And somewhere we stepped on somebody's toes at the Post and it pissed them off. But it just looks silly when the Washington Times wins every award.
Well, yeah.
They don't do it. Now the Uptown Citizen.
Yeah, so I just wondered.
If there's nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Great, thank you, everyone.
Good, Robert. All in favor, leave. You know, technically, you don't need a motion to adjourn. Right. Legally, technically, you don't.
Tara, thanks for, because my whole thing was chapter thing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm concerned about, because I've never had a chapter. and I
Right.
wanna know if other changes. So
Yeah.
whatever I can do to help.
Okay, great.
Yeah, totally on that, that's my focus.
Mindy, I was surprised that you're
Yes,
concerned
yeah,
about.
yeah, we definitely have to, and I think we're way better than we were 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
For sure, but every once in a while, we're supposed to be like, hey, let's remember, and we can, I mean, sometimes we sit around the table and we're like, what's my chapter? What's my chapter? Like, hey, no. Yeah, yeah. I was trying to articulate that. Yeah, I'll definitely reach out, once I get, we gotta get through it this week. So as soon as I hit that up in May, I'll probably kind of like use you and Sue, and Becky as kind of like the idea generators, and then we'll loop in the membership committee and kind of get everybody going on the same page. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The, some of them are ISAE, which is Indiana Society. So they don't have. Right? So at their convention, during lunch. Did you notice they changed the paper?
No.
And the election process has been open for a week. And then it was just like.
That guy is
So a lot of
got brain damage.
So that's not the core of our people.
You heard about that, right?
No.
Our printer.
The challenge.
This is horrible.
Yeah, association best practices.
He
says
would
it's
walk
what it
into
should
his
be.
home
But
and have him and his wife at gunpoint while they're inside their
you
home.
can't go with best
And
practices.
then hit him in the head with their gun.
It's not who you are.
And he ended up coming back to work eventually, and then said, I keep having these headaches. And they made him go to the hospital and he had a brain bleed. And he just